Good evening and welcome to the 44th Presbyterian Church. My name is Nikki McCarthy, moderator of the Women's Association. This evening we are having our Harvest Home Dinner, and I'd like to welcome everyone. Thank you.
I want to take you back tonight to the summer of 1897. The image that you see on screen in front of you is the only known image of a column of about 450 miners. It's taken on the 10th of September, 1897, between 3:30 and 3:45 in the afternoon, but who's trying to be correct? We know that that's about the time this was taken because the shooting that will occur is over before 4 o'clock, and it's happened after one of the two American flags these miners were carrying was broken over the knee of a mine owner's son, okay, who just felt that these miners had no business marching and striking for what they were striking for. Now, let me see by show of hands, and keep them up for just a second, how many people have someone in their family that was involved in mining? Whoa, okay, so we do have pretty good representation in here. I can tell you that the grandfather I'm named after, William Thomas Smith, only it wound up being William Edward Bachman, lived just about right here in what is Milnesville, Pennsylvania, like right behind where the Sheetz gas station plaza is at the intersection of the Beltway and 309. If anybody knows where that is. And my grandfather was 15 years old the day this happened. He never once talked to me about that, nor do I believe he talked to anybody else in the family. Now, I was only 10 when he died, okay? But he was 15 years old the day Lattimer happened. Within a year or two, the whole Smith family moved from that area up to Wilkes-Barre, okay? Lattimer is approximately 1.5 to 2 miles outside of the city boundaries of the city of Hazleton. What were these guys marching for? Well, some very basic things, like 2 cents an hour more. They were marching for a reduction in their work week, which was 60 hours a week. They tried to get that pulled down. That was a 10-hour day, 6 days a week. They were marching to try to not have to be forced to purchase all their commodities for their household in the company store. They, after all, lived in a home that was a company home that they paid rent on. And then I think one of the ultimate indignities that these guys faced was the fact that they had to buy at the company store their own blasting powder so that they could keep working in the mines. To give you an idea, a container of blasting powder in 1897 cost those miners either $1 or, if somebody was really gouging them, $1.25. The mines bought that same keg of blasting powder for 25 cents. That's the kind of profiteering the mine owners were forcing on these miners. These folks were particularly Southern European immigrants. Okay? You're going to hear in this program this evening where this really almost becomes a racial issue between the Northern Europeans who had been in control of the mines at this point for almost 50 years and the Southern European immigrants who came in from Slovakia, from Poland, from the Ukraine, etc. And they didn't speak a lot of very fluent English, but God bless these guys. They believed with all their heart, and they put their life on the line this day, they believed with all their heart that if they carried an American flag, they were protected and they had their First Amendment rights to free speech. Okay? It will cost, in about 15 minutes, it will cost 19 of these guys their life. They will be shot down in the road by the sheriff of Luzerne County and his men. Now, that brings me to why I really started to research this, and it took me 3 years to put this piece together. I read the original book by Mike Novak, The Guns of Lattimer. I would suggest you try to get it. Guns of Lattimer can be found at half.com for probably $3 in a readable condition. It may, as a matter of fact, be out of print at this point. But Mike Novak, who went on to be the president of the American Enterprise Institute in Washington, was outraged by what had happened at Lattimer. His ethnicity was that of some of the folks that were here. And Mike did a lot of original research on it. I discovered that all his original work resided in the Stonehill College Library in their archives department. Stonehill's in Easton, just outside of Boston. And as soon as I made a connection with that, I spent time one summer a couple of years ago up there in that archival department, poring over all of Mike's original research work. And it was really an eye-opener for me. I could not get over the fact that things could get so out of hand. And again, I do this particularly from the standpoint of the 400-level conflict class I teach. How can an incident get so out of hand that all of a sudden you've got 19 miners dead in the road? I teach my students in that class that a conflict starts the size of a pinhead, and it can be stopped before it gets much larger, and if it isn't stopped, it will continue to spiral out of control until you have something like this. So we're going to pick this up in the summer of 1897. I'd just like to explain the sheets that I passed out to you. The first one that says the Literary Digest, New York, July 31st, 1897, under topics of the day, Pennsylvania's alien tax. In June of that year, the legislature of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania passed the Campbell Act. Here's what the Campbell Act said in a nutshell. If you were not born in the United States, but you're working in Pennsylvania, you will instantly pay a 3-cent a day tax. So in a 6-day work week, you're 18 cents behind everybody else you work with. Back then, that would have bought a couple pounds of butter, maybe a pound or so of bacon, etc. And it had you behind the 8 ball before you started. Okay, you can read some of the thinking that was going on that July as the alien tax was getting underway. The second image that you have is of the courtroom in the second courthouse to be built on Public Square in 1895, 2 years before, and this is the courtroom of Judge Stanley Woodward. If you look directly under the clock, you can see the judge himself on the bench. That judge is the guy who heard the trial of murder accusing Sheriff James Martin and 85 of his 100 deputies of the murder, specifically of one miner. And I'll get to that on the other side of this. And then finally, the murder that's happening this afternoon, the 10th of September, 1897, precipitates the miners who survived to put this piece together, and it was adopted on the 11th of September, 1897, and then published in the Philadelphia Public Ledger on the 13th of September, 1897. Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to hear these miners and their specific question to each one of us over these 116 years. This year was the 116th anniversary. In the next to last paragraph, it's a very short one-sentence paragraph. Listen to it as they're asking us over this chasm of 116 years. We place ourselves before the bar of public opinion and appeal to the good citizens of the state and country and ask them if there was some justification or warrant in such assassination. Those guys are talking to us today, okay? We're going to now go back, and now I'll put my communications hat back on. We're going to go back, and in my Com 100 class, when I get to the time of old-time radio, which we know the golden age of radio happened from 1925 to 1950, some of the most inventive, creative things ever done in radio were done during that time, and it all was based on a good script that hinted at sound effects and had believable voices, and that's what we've tried to do here. So now you're not going to see much on screen until the end happens, and I look out for the end. but I want you to exercise the largest organ in your body, which is your brain, and exercise it by painting the scenery for yourself. Old-time radio was called theater of the mind for a purpose, okay? We're going to lower the lights in here. You're going to listen to the whole show unfold and go back to the summer of 1897.
Anthracite coal mines are working environments that few of us will ever experience. When you risk your life on a daily basis to provide your family with food and shelter, the right to ask for pennies a day more should not bring another possible death threat with it. On September 10, 1897, one of the most vicious attacks on workers in the United States took place near Hazleton, Pennsylvania, under the leadership of the sheriff of Luzerne County. In less than 3 minutes, 19 anthracite coal miners were shot dead in the street. Many shot in the back as they tried to flee the carnage. This old-time radio dramatization is based on existing historical records of the Lattimer Massacre and subsequent trial.
A fight broke out earlier today, Friday the 13th of August, 1897, in the Honeybrook Colliery near Hazleton, Pennsylvania. It appears the mine is now requiring the young lads who were the keepers of the mules that haul the coal from the mines to work up to 2 extra hours per day with no extra compensation.
Here are my tools. And no, Mr. Gomer Jones, I will not work another 2 hours a day without pay caring for the company's mules. And neither will any other mule boy in this mine. It's 1897, Mr. Jones. We have a right to be paid for the honest work we do here.
Look here, John Bowden. You don't take that tone with me. I'm the foreman of this mine, and you'll do as you're told. From now on, mules get stabled at Audenried. That means you're here an hour before your shift starts to get your mule, and an hour after your shift ends to take it back. And no additional pay.
But it's not right, Mr. Jones. If you and the company have your way, every mule boy in northeastern Pennsylvania will have to work another 12 hours a week with no pay for those hours. We work 60 hours a week now as it is.
You ungrateful beggar. Be glad you can work for a company that employs you 6 days a week.
Ah! Don't! No, please don't, Mr. Jones. Don't hit me.
From here in the Luzerne County Courthouse on Public Square this 8th of March, 1898, final arguments to the jury have been presented in the case of Sheriff James Martin and nearly 100 deputies. They're charged with killing 19 miners in Lattimer just outside of Hazleton last September 10th, as the miners, mostly Eastern European immigrants, protested for a modest pay increase and better working conditions. The march had started in Harwood, south of Hazleton, and passed through other communities successfully before ending in the stunning violence and carnage at the entrance to Lattimer, just north and east of the city. Over these last 5 weeks, numerous witnesses have testified to hearing a wide range of claims. One witness said they heard Deputy Bornheiser claim that they should be paid so much a head for every miner they could kill. Schoolteacher Grace Coyle told of running to aid bleeding miners in the dirt road where the shootings took place, of making tourniquets from pieces of her petticoat to stop the bleeding, and of how an editor lost his job for simply creating the newspaper headline that said, Lattimer Massacre. There was the testimony of others who sat next to miners on the streetcars leaving the scene afterwards and hearing them boast of how many shots they got off, or how many, to use their words, hunkies they thought they had killed or wounded. We've heard of men being shot in the back as they tried to run away. Testimony by the Hazleton undertakers verifies that actually happening. And we've heard Sheriff Martin, who after the massacre told reporters that he gave the order to commence shooting, reverse himself under oath and say he never gave the order to fire. At times, counsel for both the defense and prosecution got contentious, and at one point, Judge Stanley Woodward, apparently tired of the sympathy for the miners shown by the media accounts of the trial, declared that if what he called falsehoods continued to be reported, he'd close the door of the courtroom to the press corps. Judge Woodward has also been seen as sympathetic towards the defense in his handling of objections and his almost outright endorsement of the sheriff's testimony just before he charged the jury. It comes to the point of reckoning on this early March day in 1898. The men of the jury will deliberate and render a verdict. Did Sheriff James Martin of Luzerne County and his posse of nearly 100 sworn deputies willfully fire on the marching miners? Were the miners armed or not? Were they within their rights to march on a public road as they protested bad working conditions and near-starvation pay? The fact remains 19 men died immediately. That total has now risen to 25, with dozens more permanently injured as a result of last September 10th's encounter at the entrance to Lattimer. To date, what happened there stands as one of the largest examples of bloodshed in organized labor in the United States. We and the rest of the world await the verdict. Just a moment. Just a moment. We may have a verdict. Just a moment. Something's happening. We're informed that the jury has retired for the evening, so northeastern Pennsylvania will have to wait to see if justice has been served. It waits along with an anxious world that has watched and been shocked at what happened last September 10th just outside of Hazleton, Pennsylvania.
Gentlemen of the jury, in the matter of Sheriff James Martin and his deputies accused of murder at Lattimer, Luzerne County, on September 10th, 1897 last, have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor.
And how say you?
Not guilty, Your Honor.
Father, I can't believe it. 19 men slaughtered outright. Another 6 died of their wounds. And the best the legal system can do is not guilty?
John, we need to accept the outcome. It's the legal system at work. We don't have to believe it is correct. It may take decades, but I believe the truth of what happened in Lattimer will be seen. It will be seen in time, John.
Extra! Extra! Trial verdict in. Sheriff Martin and the deputies found not guilty. Sheriff Martin and the deputies not guilty in the incident at Lattimer.
The following was adopted at a mass meeting at Harwood, September 11th, 1897, one day following the events at Lattimer, and published in the Philadelphia Public Ledger, September 13th, 1897. For years we have been oppressed by Sea Party and Company, by the payment of starvation wages. They have deprived us of our liberty by compelling us to deal in their company store. They have forced us to purchase powder at 5 times the actual value and have otherwise tyrannized us in ways too numerous to mention, so that we are no longer free men, but slaves. We assembled together peacefully and to seek redress for our grievances. Not one man among us was armed. Our mission was not to take human life, not to destroy property, but to go and meet our fellow employees of the same company at Lattimer, who were in sympathy with us. We were opposed on the public highways, and without provocation, were shot down like dogs.
The question from Nancy is, did anything change at all as a result of the massacre? Up until this point in time, John Fahey's, the real John Fahey's actual work in signing miners into the United Mine Workers was moving, but it wasn't great. Between this time in 1897 and the end of 1898, there were 10,000 new miners went into the United Mine Workers from Luzerne County. Luzerne and Upper Schuylkill County, okay? So that was one thing that changed. Eventually, yes, they got their 2 cents an hour, etc., but it would take a little longer for them to get the lower work week. Okay?
How long did the company stores exist? How long?
For a long time. Remember, this is 1897, and the company stores had probably existed since about the 1830s or 40s.
How long after that?
After Lattimer? I would imagine at least through about the time period of the end of World War I. Okay. Remember, one of the great factors there was mobility, and if you had to walk into a town, you thought twice about it. Now, Lattimer was connected via the streetcars that we heard about, because the sheriff and his deputies were very shrewd. They jumped on streetcars. This column of 450 miners walked up from around West Hazleton, etc. That would be a considerable walk. We know it was a warm day on the 10th of September, 1897. Just imagine a nice late summer day, etc. And so they're walking and maybe slowed down by the weather a little bit, etc. The sheriff and his guys hopped on a trolley and got up there.
Bill, were the judge or the sheriff reelected after this?
The sheriff was. Sheriff and Woodward was, yeah. The sheriff only lived about 6 or 7 years after that, and there are several accounts that say he was never quite the same after this incident. Okay? Incidentally, everything you heard in there was researched as I put the script together for this over that period of years. I researched everything to be absolutely certain and accurate in what I do. This now, the Lattimer Massacre, is being used in an archaeology course in the University of Delaware. There's a faculty member down there who is doing archaeological digs at Lattimer. Okay? And I have come to make his acquaintance, etc., and he thought that this was essential to be integrated into what he does with that archaeology course down there. The things that you heard occurring in there, when Grace Coyle says under oath, you know, I hiked my skirt, I ripped slices of the petticoat off and made tourniquets. I would have loved to have met Grace Coyle. I bet you she was a pistol. Notice it was she who went out, not the male teacher, okay? She went out to try to aid and assist those guys. There were at least 14 of the 19 did have bullet entry wounds in their back as they were running away from the column of the sheriff's 100 deputies that day.
What model Winchester?
I don't know that. Yeah. Well, they were brand new and the year was 1897, so maybe you can deduce something from that. Okay? Yes, and there was a question over here.
Chronologically, how does that compare with the Molly McGuire action?
That was about 20 years before. Yeah, yeah. The Mollies were 20 years before this happened, okay? And again, everything, we tried to do this for reality. There were telephones by 1897. The telegraph had been around since Alexander Graham Bell, since Morse introduced the telegraph in the 1840s. Okay, so there were some rather limited but very rapid means of communications. Incidentally, at the trial on Public Square, in the second courthouse on Public Square, and Woodward's courtroom was, the picture of which I gave you earlier, it was on the second floor. There were reporters from the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Tribune, the Philadelphia Inquirer. Reporters from all over this country were there. I must tell you, I'm glad they were there because they became my primary source. After 3 attempts to dig up the transcript of the trial in the Luzerne County Courthouse and never being able to find it, every court transcript up to the Lattimer Massacre starting on the 1st of February, 1898 is there. Everything after it is there. The Lattimer transcript does not exist.
Well, thank God there's no corruption in our courts.
That also was true that Mr. William Joyce, the editor of that Hazleton Sentinel paper, he was a good newspaper man. He put a headline together that said, Massacre at Lattimer, which instantly, I guess, and I don't think he did it on purpose, would have thrown a guilt by association on the mine owners and the sheriff, etc., and everything like that. He was out of a job. Yes, Don.
Are the local newspapers in files someplace of this?
Yeah, there are some limited pieces in local papers, yeah. Yeah, and you have to go all the way back to the old Wilkes-Barre record to try to find them.
The Wilkes-Barre record?
Yeah.
Not the Hazleton paper.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. If you can get back in, it would have been the Hazleton Standard, not the Standard Speaker back then.
Right.
Okay.
They do keep archives of stuff like that?
Depending, it's a corporate decision on what they keep, obviously, okay? So some of them have it, others do not have it, okay? Incidentally, I will share this with you, that because of the national media attention, people from all over this country sent money. And the New York Times seemed to be a repository of a lot of that money. Altogether, now again, remember the year is 1897. They collected about $9,300. There are no social nets back in 1897, and here you have 19 families of guys who were killed probably about 100 feet up from where this front man's feet are right now, okay? This is right where the road, remember, Don, splits in Lattimer between Main Street and Quality Road, as we heard in the script. Those 19 miners' families, if they didn't have a son who was 12 or 13, old enough to go into the mines, that family was out of that half a company double at the end of the week. Oh, yeah. They were out as recently as the 1920s and 30s. I know this from hearing accounts in my wife's family. If someone died in a mine injury, as a result of a mine injury in a mine, the body was brought up, wrapped in a piece of blanket or carpeting, thrown on the front porch, and you were told, you know, have somebody down in the mines in 5 days or you're out. That legacy comes into the 20s and 30s. Okay? And so the great question, as we saw in the end of the Philadelphia Public Ledger piece, is, was their justification, and was the sheriff and his men warranted for what happened here at Lattimer on the afternoon of the 10th of September, 1897? What do you think? Interesting. I hope you enjoyed it. It's always a pleasure to be able to present something to you. Thank you. And because I do get the question, yes, there are copies of it at the outrageous price of $9 a copy, and the holidays are coming.